really getting into the mimer and learning it and understanding it and having it truly affect us in our lives. So I want to go too fast, and I want to have the opportunity to share with you your thoughts on it and how you feel about it. Can everyone see it clearly? Can you see the mimer clearly? Yes.
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 We said that the whole purpose of creation and the whole idea of why Hashem created the world is in order for him to have a dwelling place in the lower realms, to have a world that is physical, and in the physical world, for us humans to transform it into a holy place. And that's the idea of the sacrifices, we said. What's the idea of the sacrifices? To take the animal, which in the human represents the animal soul, Nefesh Bahamis, and offer it up on the fire of love of Hashem. That's basically what we're talking about. Now we're going to take it a step further. In the next two chapters, the Rebbe says not only is it about transforming the physical world to spiritual, but it's about transforming even that which causes us to get it too involved in the physical world, also to transform that spiritual. In the course of this chapter, there will be a little bit of Musar, Hasidic style Musar, which is, there was someone said that Rabbi Charles Salanter was the founder of the Musar movement. And people said to him, complained to him that it's very difficult and bitter and whatever. And he said that sometimes when a person is sick, you have to take a bitter medicine. And he said it to one of the Hasidic rabbis, and he said, yes, and Hasidic takes that medicine and coats it with sugar. So Musar means the transformation, the ethics transformation of ourselves. Hasidus approach it from a very positive perspective. And here we do have a little bit of going into a little bit about what causes a person to sin, what causes a person to turn away from Hashem. So let's get into that. What we have discussed above, we will now understand. Masha hamishkan haya me'atzei shitim dafka. In the sanctuary, in the desert, Hashem says to Moshe to make a sanctuary. It was a portable sanctuary, and it was made of the walls were made of beams of wood coated with gold. It was covered with 3 layers, first with a cloth, multicolored, beautiful cloth tapestry, and then with goat's hair, and then with skins. And then there were other parts of it too. But the main Mishkan was made of beams, wooden beams. And those beams, so in the English translations, they say that it's acacia. But nowhere in the Jewish text does it say anything about acacia. It says in the Jewish, Rashi says that it was arazim, it was cedars. Cedars. It was actually beams of cedar. It says that when Yaakov went down to Egypt, he brought with him seedlings of cedars from Israel, Canaan, and had them transplanted them in Egypt. And he told the Jews, when you leave Egypt, take these cedars with you, you'll have use for them. And that was one of the things that gave the Jews, whenever they saw those cedars, they knew that one day we're going to leave here, we're going to take that with us. They knew they were going to go out into the desert and build a Mishkan. It kind of helped give them the strength to overcome the harshness of the exile. So these beams are made of cedar wood. The Hebrew word for cedar, anyone?
Erez, Arazim.
Erez, correct. And Rashi says, Yaakov nata arazim. Yaakov planted arazim, cedars in Egypt. But the term in the Torah is atzei shitim. And that's what the Torah uses the word shitim. And as a matter of fact, if you'll permit me, I didn't set it up before. I guess in Hawaii, everything is slower. So I'm just working with it. Forgive me. It'll take me a moment. and I'm going to share, the sharing might come off for a second, but I'm going to share the actual pasuk. And get there. Just a second. I have it here, and I'm going to share it now, and then you'll find it together. Okay, so here it's talking about making the actual various parts of the mission. Huh?
Sorry, it was a little fuzzy, sort of broken up.
Okay, I'll when I find the right page, I'll make it a little bigger. A little bit further. 1 second. I believe is it this? That's sorry about this. I could have found it before. I'll get there. This is the Parochet. Here we go. You shall make the planks for the Mishkan of acacia wood. Can you see it? Make it bigger. To make the planks for the Mishkan of acacia wood upright. Can you see it?
Yes.
Hebrew, Vasita et hakrashim la Mishkan, you should make the beams or the planks for the Mishkan atzei shitim omdim, of shitim wood. So why does the Torah use the word shitim? Why that particular kind of wood, and why does the Torah actually use that word? So this is what he explains now in the Maimon. Since the main service in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary, Umigdash, and in the temple, is to transform the darkness to light. This is the idea of the service of the sacrifices, as we said before. Introduces in parentheses another concept, which is especially the incense, which is on a higher level of transformation. I'm not going to go into that. Through the service in the temple, through this, we said through the service in the mikdash, in the sanctuary, and in the Beis Hamikdash, this is how we brought the light of Hashem into the world. And in the human process, that is the transforming of the negative to positive, the darkness to light, is what brings the light of Hashem to the world. And remember, we are using the parallels between the building of the Mishkan and the human being. That's why, because the whole idea is transformation of negative to positive, darkness to light. That's why it's called Atzei Shittim, Shittim wood. In a Shita, Pirush Netia. The word Shita means turning away. The word Shita in Hebrew, the Shin and the Sin are interchangeable. So, right? Michal, Sata means turned away.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes.
The word Shita means to turn away. There is something that is called the middle. The Rambam talks about the fact that the Torah way, the path of Hashem, is to follow the middle path. You shouldn't be stingy, and you shouldn't be so generous that you give away everything you have. Middle path, be generous to the extent that you can. You shouldn't be ascetic and not eat and not drink and kind of minimize your involvement so much in the world that you're not involved in the world. On the other hand, you shouldn't be totally thrown into the world. You should walk the middle path. So there is the middle path. Va'atoya le'ezet tzad, turning in either direction. L'mayla or l'mata, whether you're turning up or you're turning down. Nikrashita, that's called sata, that's called turning away from the path. And later on, we'll learn that there is the idea of shita, which means turning downward, turning away from the proper path, away from the path in the negative way. And then there's turning above the path, which is being a little crazy in the positive way. Now, this word shita, do you see it do you see its root? Do you see connection to a word that we all know about in Yiddish, a Yiddish word? It's a Hebrew word. We use it in Yiddish. Anyone? Don't say it, Michal.
I actually don't know Yiddish, so I don't know.
I know, but you can look ahead. You ever heard of the word shtus? Shtus?
No.
You anyone ever heard the word shtus?
Yes.
I've
Shtus,
heard,
yeah, it's a shtus, a shtusim, shtus.
what's
Place.
shtus?
Place.
Huh? What was that?
What's
Isn't it a
shtus?
place? A place? A shtus?
No. Shtus means foolishness and idiocy.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
actually
shtus.
Hebrew. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
shtus,
yeah.
that's what I said. It's Hebrew, but it's Yiddishized.
Yes.
There's a story they tell, and very few people will get this, but there was a guy in Germany, and an SS soldier is he's trying to hide that he's Jewish. So an SS soldier says, "Sprachen Sie Deutsch?" I can't explain that really very well, but Yiddish, because Yiddish is very similar to German, and Yiddish, a lot of Hebrew words are said as Yiddish words. So he answered a Yiddishism, which is actually a Hebrew word, a child. In German, it would be a Frage. Anyway, all right. So v'chein pirush shtus, this is also the meaning of the word shtus, which means foolishness. What has shtus got to do with turning away from the right path? The shtus, because shtus, foolishness, hu hataya mihayadiya v'achachma. What is foolishness? Foolishness means when you turn away from knowledge and from wisdom. What is someone being foolish? That means they're not being wise. They're not thinking about things. They're doing stupid things. As we all know, someone did something stupid, and someone asked them, their spouse or their teacher or parent or someone, ask them, why did you do that? He says, I wasn't thinking. Or what were you thinking? I wasn't thinking. Because foolishness is turning away from knowledge, turning away from wisdom. The idea of knowledge and understanding, that is the middle path. Turning away from this, nikrashtus is called foolishness. So it could be that someone is foolish in holiness, as we'll soon see. It could be that someone is foolish in a negative way. Any kind of turning away from the middle path. The middle path is the intellectual path. There was a guy who supposedly had claimed, had predicted a few earthquakes without question. And he predicted, this is a long time ago, and he predicted an earthquake on a Shabbat. There was going to be a huge earthquake, and he recommended everybody get out of that. He predicted it to some Hasidim, whatever, and he had predicted the previous few. So a couple of rabbis call me, they're getting out of town, they're going to Fresno for Shabbat. You should get out of town and go, take your community with you and go. And I thought to myself, and then 3 guys called me and said, you got to get out of town. So I called an advisor of mine, and I said to him, what do you think? You think I should leave town? He says, you are known for being level-headed. If you leave, you're going to completely ruin your reputation of being level-headed. Of course, I didn't go, and of course, there was no earthquake. But anyway, all right. So level-headedness, thinking, measuring what you're doing, that is using the intellect, that is the straight path. Foolishness means going away from that level-headedness. Vihine, yes, now we're going to talk about the 2 types of foolishness. There's foolishness of impurity and foolishness of holiness. And actually what he's going to talk about here is that the way to overcome the darkness is by light. The way to overcome the foolishness of impurity is by being foolish on the other way. The Rambam says that you have to walk the middle path, but if someone has gone off the path to one side, then the way to solve it is to go all the way to the other side for a while, like swing the pendulum the other way and then eventually bring it straight. So if somebody has been a miser, so what that person should do is become completely generous, give away everything they have. If someone is arrogant, they should be completely humble and allow everyone to step all over them, etc., etc. If someone has been very, very involved in physical food and everything like that, overly involved in food, a person should get away from that and eat very little. And the same thing, of course, with alcoholism. The way to get out of alcoholism is to refrain from alcoholism altogether. It's a bit of a different one because it's hard to get back into it without going back to alcoholism. But the idea is that if a person has gone off the path in one direction, the way to solve that is not to try and get back to the middle, but to go to the other side. So here now we're going to spend some time about talking about what is this idea that foolishness leads to sin. There is shtus, foolishness, of the other side. L'umat zeh means the other side. Impurity. So, it says in the Torah, there's a whole section in the Torah that talks about a woman who is suspected of being unfaithful. Not just suspected. Her husband, she's been hanging out with a guy, and her husband told her not to be alone with him, and she was alone with him, and locked behind closed doors, and nobody knows what happened. He said it to her in front of witnesses, and in front of witnesses, she was alone with him. Now, the question is, was she unfaithful or not? She was already unfaithful by being alone with this guy. It's already a negative thing. It's against the Jewish law and everything. But we don't know whether they actually were involved intimately. So he brings, they have to go to Jerusalem if he wants to. She wants to go to Jerusalem, and she drinks the special waters, which have the ashes, dirt on it, and the ink from the Torah, the part of the Torah that was written, and she drinks it, and if she was unfaithful, she dies, and if she was faithful, then she becomes much healthier. So the Torah starts this whole section with ish kitista ishto. If a man's wife, a woman will tista. What does it mean tista? Will sin. But what does it mean? The word is kitista, which means will turn aside. What does it mean she'll turn aside? Pirish Rashi, so Rashi explained what is the term she turns aside. Tat midarkei hatzniut. He turns away from the path of modesty. This is a woman who has turned away from the path of modesty. So that's called tisteh. She's called in Hebrew. Anyone know what's a woman like this called in Hebrew?
Isha sota.
Sota, correct. Because she has turned away, this is the word, sota, she's turned away from the path of tzniut. In addition to that, there's another place in the Torah where we see this concept of the word shita or sita being used for sinning. If it says in the Torah, Vayeshav Yisrael Bashitim. Remember the story when Bilam came to curse the Jews and he couldn't curse them, he blessed them instead. So before he left, he gave advice to Balak to get the Jews involved in promiscuity and therefore to get them to worship the Baal. So it says, Vayeshav Yisrael Bashitim, the Jewish people dwelled in a place called Shittim. It wasn't its actual place, the name of the place, or it was called that. The reason it was called that eventually is because of the Jewish people had sinned, turned away from the path of modesty at that time. So that's the word Shittim. Shu'inyan hashtut el umatzeh. Becoming immodest, becoming immoral, is something that is the foolishness of impurity. Razal, as the sages said, Ein adam aver avera, a person will not commit a sin, ela imkein nichnas bo ruach shtut, unless a spirit of foolishness came into him. And now we're going to explain why is that. Why is it foolish to commit a sin? I mean, hey, committing a sin is the people who go to a lot of. There was a guy here, Shabbat, one of the people who was here. So he's facing bankruptcy, he's facing charges because he set up a whole scheme and he had auctions and he was stealing, just unbelievable. And I was thinking to myself, this guy has done so much. He took so much wisdom to do all of what he did. If he could have put that into an honest business, I would have been a multi-millionaire. Why did he have to use it for falsehood, for cheating, right? There's a lot of wisdom going into it, but it's not that kind of wisdom. It's really not that kind of wisdom. It really is a spirit of foolishness. Because the truth is, if he would have used his wisdom properly, he could have done so much better and he wouldn't have been facing everything he's facing now. Baruch hazeh, this spirit of foolishness, mechaseh al ha'emet, covers the truth. Baruch shtus, this spirit of foolishness, ruach haklipa v'asitra achra, that is the spirit of the shells and the other side. V'nikra shtut, why is it called foolishness? Al derech melech zakein oksil. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is called an old and foolish king. It's called old because it comes into us as soon as we're born. And the Nefesh Halakit, the divine soul, only comes in slowly. It completes its entrance when we bar bat mitzvah. So the Yetzer Hara is older, but it's also very foolish. It's called foolish. And we'll soon elaborate. This foolishness of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, covers over the light and redemption and revelation. The Elokutu emet v'chaim. Godliness is truth and life. As it says, V'havaya Elokim emet, Hashem, God is truth. Hu Elokim chaim, who is the God of life. V'haruach shtut, and the spirit of foolishness, mechasa ala emet, covers and hides the truth. V'achayet Eloki, and the divine light. I'm going to stop for a second. Anybody want to jump in with something? Okay. If you do, please. Therefore, this is called klippa. Klippa means a shell. Look, why is the impurity called a shell? Just like the shell covers the fruit. Similarly, the foolishness, spirit of foolishness, hides and covers over the light of the revelation of godliness. Zahu hasiba, and this is the reason, this is what leads to Masha el cause, Masha efshar asher ha'adam yachol liyot chas v'shalom over avera, that a person can, God forbid, commit a sin. And now he's going to explain this. Why is it? So in other words, it's this shell that hides the revelation of godliness that could cause a person to sin. Without that shell, it's not possible that a person would sin. Now he's going to explain. Because apparently the question is, how is it possible that a human being could come to commit a sin? We're created by God. God told us what to do, and we're not doing it. How's it possible? It's because a person doesn't feel that this causes him to be separated from God. I have to tell you, I have to take a break to tell you a story. That was on Fridays, Chabad Yeshiva Bacham on Fridays go to visit stores and businesses and visit people, put on tefillin with them, invite them to put on tefillin, talk to them. So there was this guy, a couple of friends of mine, that used to go every week to Madison. I was in Morristown, New Jersey, to Madison, take a train to Madison, New Jersey, not Madison, Wisconsin. And they would go there there was a whole row of stores, and most of the guys that were Jewish, they would stop. There was one guy, whenever they would come in the store, he would yell at them, get out, get out, get out. I don't want to talk to you. So once they decided they were going to find out why he's so mad at them, why he's so, everyone else, either they'd put on film, they didn't put on film, they did speak to them, they did study, they didn't, but nobody was yelled at them like that. So finally, one day they came into the store. They said, listen, if you want, we'll never come again. But tell us why you're so angry at us every time you come in. What do you have against us? That I went to a Chabad yeshiva for a couple of years. Since then, I just cannot enjoy the physical world. He says, all my friends, I go with my friends to non-kosher restaurants and we do all kinds of things. And they all have a ball. And I do it, but I just can't enjoy it. I just feel guilty. Anyway, so this kind of learning gets a person to realize that committing a sin is foolishness. It takes us away from godliness. V'nidme asher hodena beyahaduto. And it seems, and by the way, that's not the Chabad way. The Chabad way is to celebrate every mitzvah. And they spoke to him, and they got him to realize that he could still do a mitzvah once in a while. And he actually became friends with them, and they started putting on tefillin, and changed it completely because he was so fixated on the negative that he was doing. He was doing it anyway. Go ahead and do a mitzvah, Anyway. So it seems to a person that when he's committing a sin, he's still just as Jewish as before. And I have to say something: we are just as Jewish as before because the essence of a Jew never changes. We're continuously being a Jew. But Yahadusu means Yiddishkeit. The Jewish experience becomes different. We don't have the same Jewish experience when we are coming away, separating from God. A person thinks he has the same Jewish experience. If he would know the truth. Moshe, who as it is, Shalidei hachet va'avan, that through the sin, naasa nifrad me'elokot, the person becomes separated from God. Lo haya oseh dvar ha'avera rachman litzlan. What does that say? Well, B'shum ofen. A person who would know that by committing a sin it would separate us from godliness, that person would never, under any circumstances, commit that sin. Why is that? Why is that? How do we know? And why is it that a Jew, if he really recognized that this tears him away from God and from Judaism, he would never commit the sin? Why is that? Lefisha beteva kol Yisrael, because it is the nature of every Jew. Eino ratzeh b'shum ofen, that he does not want under any circumstances. Ve'eino yachol klal, and it's not possible for him at all. Liot nifrad me'elokut, to be separated from godliness. Not possible. For a Jew to be separate from godliness is not possible. Now I have to say that obviously if someone grew up without any Jewish identity and not recognizing even that they're Jewish and thinking that their parents are Jewish and not them, there are obviously exceptions. But in general, the fact is that any Jew, when it comes to being separated from God, would rather die. Haraya, and we have proof for that. Because when a test comes up, V'kofin oto chas v'shalom, and someone is forced, God forbid, al inyan shel kfira, to do something that clearly denies God's existence. In that situation, he can't make a mistake. To think, that he doesn't become separated from godliness. So, in other words, if a person says bow down to an idol, like the Greeks in the time of Hanukkah said, write down on a horn of a ox that you have no part in the God of Israel. So in that situation, a person would throw his life away. And Makabel alav kol minei yisurim, and God forbid would accept upon himself all kinds of suffering. And he gives his life for the holiness and sanctification of God's name. And we see this in fact, mamash, literally, in fact. And this has been, by the way, our history through the generations. Even people who are very light in their connection to God, very far from godliness, the lowest level of spirituality. Pochei Yisrael, sinners among the Jewish people, who the rest of their life, they haven't really done any of the mitzvahs. They are willing, they are possible for them to give their life for the sanctification of God's name. Not alulim, not everyone does, but there are many times we've seen in history that someone who has no connection to Judaism suddenly they challenge that way and they give their life. How could it be? There's a famous story of there was a town where they had a gravestone that said, "Here lies Yasala, the holy Gana, the holy thief." And the story was that he was the leader of a group of thieves, and they decided, Jewish thieves, and they decided to knock off the church, to go into the church and to steal all the they have a lot of fancy stuff, like gold, silver, So Yasala was the strongest one among them. So the rest of the band stayed on the bottom. He climbed up the top to the steeple, jumped through the top window, filled up bags of stuff. And the deal was that he was going to go up to the top, throw the bags down, they would take it and go away. But somehow the police got wind of this, and the others ran away, and the police were standing at the bottom of the church. And he threw down the things, and he came down, and they caught him. And when they put him on trial, they said to him that the only way he can save himself from the death penalty is to convert to Christianity. Said when he saw that that was the case, he said, "Actually, did you a favor. You worship these idols, and I was trying to show you that these idols can't even protect themselves. Never mind protect you." Anyway, but they gave him that ultimatum, and he ultimately decided to die, and he died Al Kedushat Hashem, to sanctify the name of God, even though all his life he'd lived like a Ghana. And he was buried, and the stone said, "Here lies the holy Yasala, the holy Ghana." So why is it that a person who has lived his whole life not connecting to God, not connecting to Judaism, suddenly, if he's faced with this, as we've seen throughout history, will suddenly give his life for God? And the answer is Lafi, because Da'az Harayodea or Margish Benafsho, he feels his soul. Soul comes up because now it's a question of giving up his connection to God altogether. His neshama comes out and says, "Whoa, that we're not going to do." And he doesn't want, God forbid, Israel, to separate from the God of Israel. Because like this, to be, God forbid, nifrad, separated Israel from the God of Israel, ein bicholet shum bar Yisrael, is not possible for any Jewish person to happen. Aval b'sharei dvarim, but nevertheless, when it comes to other things, hainu b'sharei averot lachman, it's like other sins, but eino yodea, he doesn't know, ve'eino margish, and he doesn't feel, shenasa al yedei zeh nifrad me'achdoto yisbarach, that he becomes through this separated from the unity of God. Because if you ask any typical Jew, if I do this sin or that sin, don't keep Shabbos, don't keep kosher, whatever, am I separating? Am I no longer Jewish? Of course you're still Jewish. Am I separating from God? No, I'm not doing anything against God. Most people will think that way because they don't know any better. And it seems to him that after the sin, he's still just involved in Judaism as much as he was before. But the fact is, it's not the case. This concept, this feeling, this thought that I'm just as Jewish as before and was not in any way affected, my connection with God was not affected, this comes meharuach shtut, from the foolishness sitra achra, of the sitra achra. From machasa al ha'or v'hagiloi, that it covers the light and the revelation, that he shouldn't feel it. And now he explains, what does that mean exactly? Pirish, this means the haruach shtut goremlo, that this spirit of foolishness causes a person, la'adam, to a person, ha'eder ha'hergesh, a lack of feeling. Now, let's stop for a moment. The Rebbe, when he explained this in later years, the Rebbe explained, as I told you, I think last time, that over 40 years, the Rebbe explained each year one of the chapters. There's 20 chapters, each chapter twice over the course of 40 years. The Rebbe, when he explained this chapter, he said as follows. He said, it's possible for a person to have chachma and bina, to know everything about God. But what's missing is da'at. Da'at means knowledge, connection. It's something that's out there. It's possible, we know that there are people who are very religious, very great scholars. We're not just talking about here, about someone who hasn't learned anything. Someone who hasn't learned, how does he know? And someone, even if you have started learning, but how do you have that feeling? That feeling, a person wasn't brought up with that feeling, so they don't have it. And that's something which takes many years to develop that feeling. And therefore, a person who doesn't have it is not held responsible. That's why in this generation, we don't consider people wicked people. As it says in the Talmud, someone who violates Shabbos is a wicked person. We don't consider them wicked people. They're not wicked. They simply haven't learned. They don't have that feeling. But let's say someone who has been in yeshiva since he was a little kid, or she, and has grown up with it and learned it. But still, it's possible for that person to sin. How is it possible? And the answer is because the feeling is not there. I don't feel it. I know it, but I don't feel it. Das is the attaching ourselves to it to the point where it becomes meaningful and personal. V'hainu, this means that the intense desire and will v'achamimut, and the excitement and warmth, the nefesh habahamit of the animal soul. Gorem lo hakrirut v'heder haregesh b'inyanim haruchim. It causes a lack of feeling and a coldness in spiritual matters. Here's a truism that the Hasidus teaches. You can't be equally excited about the physical and the spiritual. If you're extremely excited about the physical, then you're going to be cold toward the spiritual. If you're extremely excited about the spiritual, you're going to be cold to the physical. Why? Because they're two opposites. Spiritual and physical are two opposites. Physical hides godliness. Spiritual is unity of God. Physical is many, many details. But the physical, the animal soul, all it cares about is itself, cares about ego. The divine soul cares about bittul, about accepting Hashem's will, about nullification to Hashem. So these are two opposites. So how is a person supposed to live? We're supposed to be excited about the potential of the physical to be transformed to spiritual. If you eat a steak, you get excited. I can make a bracha on the steak, and I can use the steak to serve Hashem. I can invite guests, or I can eat and enjoy it, and then feel good about it, and then learn Torah with that power, whatever it is. But if I'm totally involved in the steak, then all I'm thinking about at that moment is the physical steak. I'm not thinking about God. So when a person is extremely into the physical world, it causes a coldness towards matters of spirituality.
But Rabbi, if you appreciate the physical world as created by God, why is this contradiction? Why can't you be involved in both?
100%. If your purpose of using the physical is to connect to God, then you're excited about the spiritual, not the physical. It's not the physical itself. It's not the piece of bread that you're eating. My goodness, the most delicious piece of bread I've eaten. You're eating a piece of bread. Yes, it's a delicious piece of bread, and you're enjoying it. But your purpose of eating it is in order to be strong, because you are a servant of God, and you have to be strong to serve God. So if your purpose is that, the same like if you have, let's say you're digging a well. You're digging a well in your backyard. You decided to dig a well in your backyard. Digging the well. Do you enjoy the digging, or do you enjoy the fact that you're going to create a well? If you enjoy the digging a lot, you may not want to dig a well. You may want to continue digging even after you find the water, because you're not thinking about the well. You think, no, I enjoy the digging so much. If you the purpose of digging is for the well, so hopefully you're getting into it. You're excited about the fact that you're going to come to the well, and yeah, hopefully it's not too hard to do, and hopefully you're okay with it. Your purpose every time you dig another shovel. Wow, I dug another shovel of earth. Look at this earth that I dug up. How exciting, I dug it. That's not the excitement. The excitement is I've come closer to the water. And I'm coming closer to, right? You're building a building. Why are you building a building? Are you so excited about putting up wood and putting on the tiles and doing all that stuff? That's not what's exciting. What's exciting, I'm going to have a place to live. Hopefully you enjoy the job, but if the job is only for the purpose of building, you could build something that's not a house. You could build something you can't even live in, because you're not focusing on the living, you're focusing on the building.
Right. Yes, thank you.
The point is to focus on the purpose, and to focus on the fact that every single thing in the physical world has a spark of holiness. And when we do it for the purpose of holiness, we're elevating that spark. It says, the Baal Shem Tov said that when a person is hungry, they're hungry because the soul wants the spiritual spark that is within that thing, that piece of food that he wants. And that is how a tzaddik certainly feels that. And that's what and by the way, we're not tzaddikim, we're beinim. Hopefully, we're ordinary people. We enjoy the physical world. I enjoy the physical world. I'm enjoying Hawaii, but sorry about that. I'm not trying to here and enjoying.
Yeah.
The thing is that the point is that we have to always try and remember the focus on the purpose. Yes, I'm a human being. I'm enjoying the physical world. Try and infuse it with purpose. That's what we're saying. For a great tzaddik, they don't care about the physical world. They know it's purely a tool for Hashem. For a Beinani, they would like to get excited about the physical, but they don't. They focus on the spiritual. For the rest of us, we get excited about the physical. Okay, try and infuse it with some purpose. That's what we're saying.
Yes, thank
The
you.
more we infuse it with purpose, the less excited we'll be about the dead physical thing. Okay.
Rabbi, at the same time, we talked a few times that you cannot just go to spiritual world, meditate, and forget about physical world. It's very important to work in physical world.
Yes, 100%. And that's why we're not talking about going away from the physical world. That's why we're talking about using the physical world and keeping the purpose in mind, the goal in mind. Exactly what we're saying. And by the way, the Rebbe talks about this in his explanation of this mimer. Says that a strong physical is a weak spiritual. And the Rebbe points out that that does not mean a strong physical body is a weak spiritual, because it's part of the path of Hashem to have a strong body. There's a Hasidic saying that the Baal Shem Tov said that a small hole in the body creates a large hole in the soul. Because if you're not healthy, you can't serve Hashem properly. You have to exercise and you have to eat well and you have to take care of your body. Extremely important. I'm a big advocate of physical exercise, as you probably know. I brag about the fact that I bike every day, not because I want to brag that I bike every day. I want other people to learn. It's something that has changed my life, the physical exercise. I work out once a week with a trainer. This is something that's extremely important, but not doing it for the sake of the body because I want to have muscles, because I want to have a strong body. Because I am a servant of Hashem, and a servant of Hashem has to have a strong body to do the service. That's the point. It's when it's all about the body, that's when you lose sight of the spiritual. And that's what he's talking about. It shouldn't be all about the body. It shouldn't be all about the physical. And when I get excited about the physical itself, again, I'm eating this food and I'm so involved in the food because the food is, boy, it's the most enjoyable, wonderful thing. Or this is good food. I'm eating it. And with this strength, I'll be able to serve Hashem. Or this is good food and I'm doing it as a show to have 550 this week. Live, people on Facebook, look at the show that we did last week, the cooking show. That's something which is used for the service of Hashem. Even though at the time of the show, I look like I'm really enjoying the food, right? But that's what's going on. It's all about the using the spirit, the physical, not for its own sake, but for the spirit. So this means, can we go on, yeah?
Yes, thank you.
Die Zugebundenkeit, the being bound, tied, and to tied down to this, and to Kochtkeit, Yiddish, meaning the boiling, the burning, the excitement, the heat, in matters of desire, physical desire, bereticha, with boiling. This cools down the feeling in spiritual matters. There is as I feel Ibrigegeben Benyani Tavais over Tenais of Achumrium. Bagashmi, a person is so devoted to his physical and his material things, as the Ruchni is the Kehergish Ben Betachlas Ahelam Behestet, that the spiritual feeling is completely hidden from him. Vahainu, that means Shanasa Bilti Margish Klau, he becomes someone who doesn't feel at all. He doesn't feel the beauty and the sweetness and the pleasure of observing mitzvahs. You try to tell someone a Shabbat, lighting a Shabbat candle, sitting at a Shabbat dinner, making kiddush, enjoying the Shabbos meal. It's such a spiritual experience. There's so many people I know, come on, put on tefillin, it's going to transform you. What's the big deal? And some people put on tefillin, it doesn't do anything for them. Why? Because they're so into the physical that they can't connect to the spiritual. It does do something when you do a mitzvah, even if you don't connect to it. But people are cold to it completely. Also, the person doesn't feel aloneness from being far from God. And that happens because of the sin. I'm going to go a little faster now because I do want to cover, and I'm not going to refuse to answer questions. I want to answer questions, and I'm not going to gloss over anything. I'm just going to read a little bit faster. In general, this is the covering of the animal soul, which covers the divine soul. Again, that's why it's called klipa, a shell. And now he's going to explain how it is that if a person didn't have this cover, that it is foolishness, because if not for that, we would never be able to sin. The divine soul of a Jew is godliness. Its whole essence is godliness. Especially what's called the pinteliyid, the spark of the soul. In other words, the individual spark that every person has in their body. It is a part of God. So it's not like it's two separate things and they're connected. It's one thing. Through the spark of holiness in a person who margish b'chol inyanim elokis, the person feels all the spiritual things. Margish ma'id b'davar shu menagel elokos, and this spark of godliness within every person gets very, very upset and feels very strongly anything that opposes godliness. Behind that means that this is in each of us. Behind that means something that is not godliness. If it's not revealed godliness, he doesn't want it. Or befrat, that's even if it's just not godliness, revealed godliness. Or befrat, how much more so something that opposes godliness? Certainly, gets upset. The soul, the divine soul, gets upset. And runs away from it, like something running away from something that harms a person. Like someone who runs away from death. Because the divine soul is convinced the misa ruchnis that a spiritual death, God forbid, it's worse than a physical death, God forbid. That's why a person would be willing to give his physical life to protect the spiritual life, connection to God. And the divine soul all at once is godliness. And to make vessels for godliness. That's where, Alex, what you said, to use the physical world to make it a vessel for godliness. That's why it wants the physical world. The coarseness and the materiality of the ego and the existence of the nefesh bahamis, of the animal soul. It covers and hides over this feeling of the divine soul. To said very simply, as the Geschmack vom Welt, the pleasure that we get from the world, covers and hides is mechasa or master of dem hergish or laki, covers and hides the divine feeling. And this is the exact opposite of why we were created. Imagine if somebody sent a scholar to go into a place where people don't study in order to teach them. Instead of in order to teach them and show them the beauty of scholarship. And instead of teaching them, the scholar started playing games with them and stopped learning himself. It's the exact opposite of why he was sent. It's the exact opposite of what was Hashem's purpose in creating the world. That Hashem wanted to have a dwelling place, a home below, by the person working with his body and his animal soul. And to be in this physical world, specifically in the physical world, and to cleanse it and to purify it. And what happened in fact? He's doing the opposite. He's doing the opposite. Not only is he not transforming the world is hiding his truth, his light of truth. When I say his, it means her too. I don't think any woman will be offended if I'm talking about the negative. I'm talking about him. So I hope you don't mind. A person has become so coarse and so physical that he's lost any feeling, any ability to feel spiritual things. I did warn you at the beginning that this was Musa, right? Lived up to my warning. This comes about because of the animals. And by the way, God wanted it this way. God created us this way. God knows that we're human, and He made us human. Nevertheless, we have to think about the fact that that's not the way we're supposed to be. Ideally, we have to think about the goal and the ideal. You know, there are people who feel guilty about this, and therefore, to feel guilty, they say it doesn't matter. To say it doesn't matter is not right. To say I'm struggling is okay. I'm human. I make mistakes, yes. But to say it doesn't matter, no, it does matter. But yes, I'm human, and I don't want to get depressed about the fact that I'm not living up to it. Instead of getting depressed, I want to live up to do the opposite, to start bringing into my life a little bit of positivity, a little bit of focus on the spiritual. As we've learned, everyone in this room, virtual room, has learned, and as you all know, we all know together that one mitzvah at a time is how we get there. Because every mitzvah we do is a transformation, and every time, on the other hand, right, on the other side, and we'll get to that next week, on the other side, from the physical that hides the spiritual, every time we connect with the spiritual, it weakens the physical a little bit, and it helps us to connect with the spiritual more. That's why one positive mitzvah, we focus on one positive mitzvah, and then we grow from there. Okay, so getting back to the fact that the animal soul hides all this. The animal soul is fixed and rooted in the matters of the world. That is the whole purpose. That is, we said, the whole Inyan, the whole idea of the divine soul is that it's a part of God. The whole idea of the animal soul is that it's an animal. That's what it is. It's an animal. An animal has no knowledge. You can't get upset with an animal that doesn't discern between right and wrong. It doesn't have the knowledge. A child, you can't get upset with a child. If a child makes a wrong decision, the child doesn't have the das, doesn't have the knowledge. So the same thing, the animal soul doesn't have that knowledge. Behem Yeger, that's what the animal soul is involved in all the time. B'yachshav, that's what he thinks about. V'yidaber, that's what he talks about. B'chayis, with life. B'hergish, with feeling. With a great pleasure or great enjoyment. So this feeling, b'chalusa in general, there you go. Obefrat, inyan hanayam. Obefrat, and especially, inyan hanayam, the gishmak, the feeling, the pleasure. That he gets in this. This contradicts the feeling of spirituality. The ha'ikar, and now he says, boiling it down, what is the main problem? What is the main thing that causes us to separate and stay away from holy things, spiritual things? Ha'ikar, the main thing is because of the coldness of the divine soul. What's the difference between ignorance and apathy? We've said it many times. I don't know and I don't care. Right. So apathy, coldness towards it. The etzem kalkeit shelo in inanim ruchnim. The divine soul by nature is cold to spiritual matters. Why is that the case? And again, it's not our fault. No one's blaming us for this. This is the way it's created. Just as the divine soul is godliness, the animal soul, its whole existence, what is its essence? It is animal. Its name shows what it is. It's called the animal soul. All its life and feeling, it's only in animal things. And now, the previous Rebbe lived in a time when there were people who were cynical, fighting godliness. He was arrested by a group of the NKVD called the EF section, the Jewish section, who were young Jewish communists whose parents were Hasidim. One of the communists who was walking with him and taking him said to him, "I'd like to carry your bag. My father carried your father's bag." His father was a chassid of the Rebbe's father, previous Rebbe's father. And the Rebbe said, "Your father was worthy of carrying my father's bag. You're not worthy of carrying my bag." But this is what he was dealing with. And we see how he talks about this. He was talking about people, Jews, who were interested in uprooting Judaism. As we see in practice, in fact, that there are certain people, not only are they empty from wisdom of Torah, or midas yesharis, and proper values and proper ethics, They're literally like animals. They act like animals. What does an animal do? An animal tramples anything that's underfoot. The dursim, they trample. Umaligim, and they poke fun. Heaven forbid. Of spiritual matters. It's things they have no concept about. So you tell someone Shabbos is beautiful, they say, it's old fashioned, it's ridiculous. What do you mean? You don't even have a concept. Try it out. I tell people sometimes they make fun, especially when people come to the table and I invite everyone to talk, and everyone's welcome to say whatever they want, including making fun of Torah and everything. But sometimes someone will say, it's ridiculous, it's crazy, it's naive. So I say to them, do you ever think about the fact that 3,000 years our sages have really lived with this and followed this and kept, you think really why do you think they did it? I think it was so naive. And there was one guy who absolutely said, yes, they were all naive. They were all naive. We have science. We know the right thing. At that point, I felt I had to do something about his chutzpah. And in a very, very pleasant, nice tone, I said to him, your parents and your ancestors were also naive and stupid. Where did you get your brains from? But this is the idea that people will make fun of things and try and fight things they don't even know. It's mamish like an animal, literally like an animal. An animal tramples, walks and tramples, without knowing what it's stepping on. So the same thing, they're making fun, they're trampling on Torah without even knowing what they're trampling on. So like an animal, they don't know. It will offer v'etz, whether it's earth or wood, a guf adam, or a body of a person. Why is it? It's not trying to kill the person. Just because of a lack of feeling. Because of animal does not have das. Here's the word again, das. Das means this power of discernment, knowledge. Really internalizing it and understanding it and feeling it. Okay, and similarly, there are certain people like this, mamish like animal. They poke fun of Torah mitzvahs. And some of them choose various different strange ways. This mitzvah they do, and this mitzvah they don't want to do, picking and choosing by them, etc. By the way, picking and choosing is not the same as saying, I'm going to do a mitzvah. Picking and choosing means I'm saying this mitzvah is important, this mitzvah is not. For a person to say, I'm going to start with this mitzvah and grow, that's fine. We understand there's 630 mitzvahs. I can't jump to the top of the ladder. I got to go one step at a time. Say there's no ladder to climb, or I don't have to climb. That's the problem. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about saying that it doesn't matter whether you do the mitzvahs or not. All of this, comes from azus v'akiris nefesh bahamis, comes from the chutzpah, boldness of the nefesh bahamis, the animals. This is the reason and the cause, which caused the person to commit a sin. Remember, if he would have wisdom, if he would have das, knowledge, if he would be connected to his true essence. What is his true essence? The divine soul. The divine soul cannot be separated, doesn't want to be separated, runs away from anything negative. It's not godliness. So how is it possible that this godliness within him is doing the opposite? It's obviously because he's not connected, not in touch with the divine soul, and doesn't feel the divine soul, and doesn't feel the pain and the separation of the divine soul from God. It means he's not feeling. That means he's not thinking. That means he's not doesn't have das. That means he's foolish. Because if he was thinking, he wouldn't have done that. Ruach shtus, this is the spiritual foolishness. Sitra achra of the other side. V'hakisui the nefesh bahamis, and the covering of the animal soul. Shema'alimim umastirim al ar ha'emes. They hide and cover the light of truth. Until we get the opposite of God's will. The kavanah ha'alyona, as we said before, purpose of the higher purpose of God's will. For creating the world is in order to cleanse it. To make it a vessel for godliness. By the covering of the animal soul. In the Baha Hepach Mamish, you get the exact opposite. That the world, not only does it not become cleansed and purified, it hides and covers the light of truth Ehu haruach shtus. This is the foolishness shemechas ala emes that covers the. So going back to how we started, that's why the Mishkan was built of shtus wood, shittim, wood that's called shtus. Why? Because as we're going to learn next week, we have to take this foolishness and transform it to holy foolishness. Next week, we're going to talk about holy fools. Holy fools means. So not holy cow. Well, think about holy cow, right? Holy cow means you're using the cow for the purpose of serving Hashem. That's a holy cow. Next week, we're going to learn about holy fools. So this week, we talked about the foolishness on the negative. Remember, we said foolishness comes from the term of turning away. There is the path, the straight path of serving Hashem. And then there's the turning away, which is turning down away from godliness. Next week, we're going to learn about how to turn the pendulum in the other direction and turn on. I have to say that if you walk away from this lesson feeling guilty, then it will be the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. Not trying to accomplish anyone feeling guilty and saying, "Oh, Vay, I'm so foolish." What we're trying to say is this, and as you'll see next week, so it's a bit of a problem stopping here, leaving you here. Next week we'll see. Now we have to go out and say, let me find something holy to be foolish about. Let me use my foolishness. Let me be a little bit colder toward the physical. If I'm involved in something physical, let me stop for a moment and understand how this can be used as a tool for Hashem, for holiness. How can I use it in that way? And this way, we become more aware. It's a question of becoming more and more aware. And as I promised you, when we come to the end, the 5th week, so next week, we're going to do the 4th chapter, and then Bezrat Hashem, in 2 weeks, we're going to do the 5th chapter. Toward the end, there's a meditation that you can think about. I'm not giving it away. There's a meditation, a very short meditation you can think about that will help us to really bring this home and understand how to deal with this foolishness that all of us face. All of us face. All of us deal with it. I can say all of us because I don't think there's a tzaddik in this room. There might be a Beinani, but there's no tzaddik. How do I know? I just know. Trust me, there's no tzaddik in this room. I'm not a tzaddik either. So the tzaddik, it says in Tanya what a tzaddik is. There's one tzaddik or two tzaddikim in the world. We don't even know who that is today. We know who it was in the previous generation. We know it was up to 20 years ago when the Rebbe passed away. But anyway, but the point is, here we are all facing the struggle. The struggle is not to say, oh, give up, because I'm foolish. The struggle is to say, how can I bring some holiness, some awareness of the purpose into my daily life, into the steak, into the fancy meal, into the fancy clothing, the car, the work, etc., etc., etc.
But Rabbi, is this enough? If you cannot do the whole mitzvah, is just doing part is enough? It seems like it's not.
It depends. Okay. It depends what you mean by part of a mitzvah.
You say you can start by a few, then
I'm not saying part of a mitzvah. I'm saying part of the mitzvah, 1 or 2 of the mitzvah as a beginning.
Yes, but what if you can't?
Okay, Michal, let's say someone comes to you and says, I want to learn Hebrew. I don't know any Hebrew. Please teach me Hebrew. And you know that this person has never seen a Hebrew letter before. You tell this person, I'll teach you Hebrew. You need to know 3 letters, Aleph, Bet, and Gimel, because you figure it's hard for him to say 22 letters. It's going to be too hard. So you're going to teach him Aleph, Bet, and Gimel. You teach him Aleph, Bet, and Gimel, and he goes home thinking he learned Hebrew. Have you done him a favor?
No.
Oh. Now he thinks he knows Hebrew. He's going to go to Israel. He's going to know what you're talking about, right? Now, here's a different way. You know there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, but you know what? To learn them all today, forget it. So we're going to start. Today I'm going to teach you Aleph. And tomorrow I'll teach you Bet. Tomorrow, the next day I'll teach you Gimel. Then we'll take a week break. You'll practice your Aleph, Bet, and Gimel. And then in a week we'll do Dalet. And then a week from then we'll do Hey. And maybe we'll take a few weeks until you get that. So you're not telling him there's only Aleph, Bet, and Gimel. You're telling him there's 22 letters. But you know what? Let's start with Aleph. Let's start with Bet. So what does the guy do? The guy's excited when he learns Aleph. I've started. Now I can do Bet. Now I can do Gimel. One day I'll learn Hebrew. So when you tell someone, you know what, we're watering it down, it's too hard in this generation, we're losing our kids, so let's make it easier. Let's say we only have to keep this, we don't have to keep that. And I don't want to mention any names of any movements, but there are movements like that that have completely transformed in their minds Judaism. So they tell people it doesn't matter, you don't have to keep Shabbos, you don't have to keep kosher, you don't have to do this. And
Right.
you know what? And if you keep kosher, this part, this much of kosher, not that much of kosher, this is okay. Wine it's not kosher is okay. Oil is not kosher is okay. Cheese it's not kosher is okay. You know, when you say that to people, so it's like you're telling them Hebrew only has 3 letters.
Right.
Whereas what Chabad is saying, no, you know what? Judaism is an incredible lifestyle. And ideally, you should do it all. But you know what? You didn't learn it. You don't know it. You can't bite off more than you can chew. Let's do one mitzvah. You'll like it. You'll do another mitzvah. And if you don't, you know what? I want you to feel comfortable. So if you don't ever come back, that's the other part of mitzvahs, which is different than Aleph Beit. If you don't ever come back, you've done one mitzvah. That mitzvah connects with the eternal, as we've said, and that's beyond time. So that one mitzvah even that's the other whole level of it, that it connects with the eternal. But it's not about saying, so for example, if you say to do part of a mitzvah, so like what is part of a mitzvah? A mitzvah, it's like when you're climbing a ladder. You only climb one step at a time, but the ladder better have good steps. If one of the steps is shaky or is made of paper, you're going to fall, right? So you got to
Right.
make sure the ladder is a solid step. The mitzvah that you do has to be a mitzvah the way Hashem commanded it, not make up other ways of doing mitzvah to make it easy.
Of
That
course.
we can't do. But doing a mitzvah is a step, is a wonderful thing. Again, the other part of that is doing a mitzvah as an individual thing is also great because it connects us to Hashem. And ultimately that will bring us to do more.
So even if you don't do the whole 613, you're saying even if you do like a single one,
One mitzvah, you're on the ladder. You're getting some awareness. You're touching your soul. You're revealing your neshama. And you're showing your Judaism and you're showing your connection to Hashem.
Mhm.
It's wonderful. Now that was so good. Let's try 2. Let's try number 2. You know,
Mhm.
that's the way we do it. They say, how many Chabadniks does it take to change a light bulb? 10.
I don't
One to change a light bulb, and 9 to tell the whole world what a great experience that is. So you know, it's about enjoying the experience, about showing people how beautiful Torah is. It's about getting rid of that coldness to it. It's about getting rid of that lack of understanding that there's anything to it. By doing a mitzvah, hey, that means something. That is meaning.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Bezrat Hashem, next week, we will continue with chapter 4. Any other comments or questions? Any other?
I have a question. It's the way that you're using the term Mishkan and Mikdash. It seems to me it's a little bit redundant. I understand Mishkan is the sanctuary, and Mikdash is the inner, maybe you could say something about that.
Yeah. So the truth is that Mishkan means the dwelling place of God, right? And Mikdash means the holy place of God. So they're interchangeable. However, there were 2. There was the portable one in the desert, and eventually that was temporarily built in Shiloh, and that was destroyed. And then there was the permanent building in Jerusalem. Once, you know, before it was in Shiloh, it moved around in a few places. But once the permanent place for a holy. So we do use the term Mishkan to discuss the temporary sanctuary, and the Mikdash, the temple, were referred to the holy temple in Jerusalem. So even though the 2 are interchangeable, but nevertheless, when we talk about Mishkan and Mikdash, that's usually the way they are used. It's like the word Torah means the 5 books of Moses. It means the 24 books of the written Torah. It means every teaching of Torah, including the Code of Jewish law, and what we're doing now. So there's the broad interpretation and the narrow interpretation. So in the broad interpretation, Mishkan and Mikdash both mean the same thing. In the narrow interpretation, Mishkan means the temporary, Mikdash means the
In this Maimar, you were using in one sentence both words.
because okay, good, because the Torah says Va'asuli Mishkan, excuse me, when God was telling Moshe to tell the people to make a sanctuary, a mishkan in the desert. He said, "Va'asu."
You froze.
Your Wi-Fi is
Okay.
unstable, Rabbi.
And the word Mikdash is used, but at the time, he was temporary building. So that's why we say that the Mishkan was what he was telling them to build the Mishkan. Can you hear me?
Now we hear you.
The Mishkan. But when we talk about ourselves, it's also, again, it's interchangeable. We use both of them.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, take care. This Tuesday, I tell you a secret. This Tuesday, the very interesting show. I know it because it was recorded. I did it because I don't want to do this to my daughter to turn over her kitchen. So it's a very, very interesting show. The guy who taught me finally how to make a dough and how to make donuts and other dough things, and finally mastered the how to make a good dough. I don't know if I mastered, but I got to do it anyway. And he's a funny guy. I think you'll enjoy it.
Did
And
you
then,
say you had 550 people on?
From last week's show, we have Facebook views. Now, it doesn't mean that people watch the whole thing. It means they saw it. So usually we get between 300. So at the time of the show, we get 100 or so, 150 people viewing it. And usually over the next few days, we get up to about 350, 400. This time, we have over 550 views. I can't make that up. You can look at the Facebook thing and you'll see it. Because last
Congregation must be getting